Hello everyone. So we're going to start in about 5 minutes. Just before we start, I wanted to explain the paper. So at the end of the debate, you're going to have a chance to ask the panel questions. In front of you all, there's two pieces of paper. If you would like to ask the panel a question, write the question on both pieces of paper and hand it to the end of the row. And then some of our lovely assistants at the back will collect them in. And at the end, we hopefully will have the time to ask about 15 questions. So you've got 5 minutes to discuss, but I just want you to keep that in mind. Obviously, try and make the questions open to all the in the room and don't aim anything at anyone. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. And welcome to the Naked Debate. As I said about questions, if you do have a question, write them on both pieces of paper and hand one to the end with your name on, and then so I can read it out. So it's great to see so many of you here. As I said at the start, this is a safe space, so if you could please respect the opinions of others. You may have noticed on the way in that you actually signed a tally to say whether you were for or against page 3. At the end, we're going to ask you to sign this tally again just to see if your opinions have changed because of the speakers. Tomorrow at midday on the Knowledge website, the results will be announced of how many there were before and how many there were against. And I think that'll be really interesting. We're really linking with this debate. The running of the evening will go as follows. So we're going to start with the 2 speakers in favour of page 3, Opinion Right for the Knowledge, Phil, and VP Welfare, Charlie Green. We're then going to hear from those against page 3, and we have Jess Horner, who's a women's rep, and Lucy Holmes, who is the founder of No More Page 3. From then, we're going to take questions from the audience, and we'll wrap up nicely with hopefully feeling a bit more knowledgeable about the whole situation. So thank you for listening to me. I'm now going to introduce the first speaker, who is Phil, and he's going to talk to you about his opinion around the naked debates.
I first started thinking about page 3 in my teens. About 15 years ago, I was 15. And it's something that was it wasn't a big part of my teens, but it was a part of my teens. And I was thinking the other day when I was going through the motions of what I was going to say, and I was thinking, are boobs news? And there we go, lovely hexagonal. Quite frankly, no, they're not. Anybody who thinks that boobs are news, quite frankly, doesn't really take The Sun as a serious newspaper, can I? Thanks very much. I mean, with headlines like Wet as Prey, The Vicar of Dribley, and also, if you have a look in the top right-hand corner of the picture, page 29 for an article about the 7/7 plot being the 7/7 bombings being a plot by the government. What sort of prioritization is that? So I'm sorry, but if you think that boobs are news, you don't really think that The Sun is. Quite heavily. One of the big arguments against page 3 is the way that it makes young girls feel. But is page 3 the only place where young girls get to feel, for want of a better word of saying it, inadequate about their own bodies? Quite frankly, no. You have Cosmopolitan. You have Body. Both of those, quite scantily clad women on the front. And have a look at the article names as well. I mean, look better naked. 170 ways to get a beautiful beach body. On the next slide, some more 22 fast, flat stomach flexes. And then on the last one here, a nice picture of Holly Willoughby. I promised myself I wasn't going to do that. Willoughby in a bikini. And on the OK next to it as well, miracle bikini diets. So is The Sun really the only place where girls can see pictures of women and feel inadequate about their own bodies? No, it's not. It's the only place that they can possibly see them in the public or in the private home that's readily available to see a topless photo. But it's not really the only place that they can start to see images that would make them feel bad about themselves. Is something that I don't think can just happen from men to women. It's not. Some people seem to think that objectification can only happen from man to a woman. But if we look at the next slide, how many of you women are thinking, oh God, that's a nice fit picture. And the next one as well. Channing Tatum, Jake Gyllenhaal. And the third picture, David Beckham. Now, when I was 15, 16 growing up, there were boy bands. There was Take That, with shirts hanging open, topless photos, their abs showing, pecs, everything. You know, I didn't feel particularly good. I didn't feel particularly adequate next to those photos. Is it something that should be tailored? Or is it something that should be not tailored? What's the word I'm looking for? Neither do I. I've lost the word, sorry. Occasionally it happens. Is it something that should be restricted more? That's the one. Are topless photos something that in this OK magazine picture, David Beckham shows off his rippling abs? You don't get photos of page 3 models in The Sun saying, look at so-and-so showing off her rippling bosoms. The next slide, education. Why don't we educate people more? Educate our children in the homes, in schools, about body image. Educate them that whilst these pictures may be available, it is not necessarily something to feel bad about if you don't look that way. Everybody is unique, everybody. No need to feel bad about you. Page 3 looks different to you. Controversial. Is feminism being hypocritical? Personally, I think yes. Because in my view, feminism is all about empowering, or a woman being empowered and doing something that she wants to do. Now, why women want to do it is a different matter. Yes, page 3 is now so ingrained in our society, it could be that it is an acceptable thing. But at the same time, women still want to do it. And the argument to disband page 3 is taking away a woman's right to be able to do something that she wants to do. Doesn't that go against one of the major tenets of feminism and what it stands for? I know.
Thank you, Phil. Very insightful. If you do want to join the conversation on social media, it's at The Naked Debate or hashtag The Naked Debate, just to get some opinions and ideas flowing. Again, if you have any questions, make sure you write your name on them and pass them to the end of the row, and we can ask them at the end of the debate. So now I'm going to hand over to Charlie Green, who's going to give his opinion on The Naked Debate.
Good evening. I'm Charlie. I'm the Vice President Working Community at the Students' Union. When I was asked if I was going to do a presentation based upon this topic, I was a little bit unsure. I was nervous, to be entirely honest. When I spoke to a few of my colleagues, a few of my friends, they said, "Oh, you're brave. Why are you doing that? It's a controversial topic. Why are you putting your name to something that could..." Looking after the women's rep, you're meant to be looking after equality, diversity. And yeah, I am nervous. And in all honesty, I wanted to present because I wanted my voice to be heard. I wanted to be able to provide an equal debate because I do feel that there's an equal debate in this matter. So this is my pro page 3 argument. So go on to the next slide. This is my golden thread. These are the freedoms. These are the freedoms that we have as a society, that every single person has them. This is what we share. This is what I would like you to remember as I go through the whole of my presentation, that we had the freedom of choice, we had the freedom of speech, the freedom of thought, and the freedom of expression. I feel like all of these are congruent to where we stand with page 3. So as we go on, I'd like to talk about the individual. First and foremost, this is about the woman who chooses to engage in page 3, who chooses the career. And I am arguing that it is empowering for women. This is their choice to be able to progress onto a national scale what they do as a career, what they enjoy, what they find fulfilling, and where they see their future going into. What I also want to talk about is, sorry, can go back to the other one, is whether it's patronizing to models, to these Glamour models, to say, we don't agree with you having this national forum to be able to present what you consider yourself as a career. That's, to me, that's quite patronizing. Why are we saying that they can't do that? They can't have that forum. And here today, we don't have any page 3 models. Katie Price was once interviewed upon a panel, and she received a lot of criticism for what she did and what she had as a career. And I'm going to go into that further on in the presentation. But we don't have any here today, and that's not without lack of trying. We did invite, as far as I'm aware. But also, as a support in a career and safety in comparison, here we're looking at boobs on a bit of paper. They know they're going to get photos. They know the audience is going to be delivered to. It's going to be national. They know those risks. They also know that they're going to get paid for it. They know what they're going to get paid. They sign up to it. People know that they're there, and they have their audience. If you look in comparison to pornography, you look at internet pornography, it's incredibly risky. There are very few safety guidelines supported by the government. It's not well accepted upon the majority of our culture. Page 3, it offers women that opportunity, that empowering support with their career. What I also want to talk about is women as leaders. There has been, and as far as I'm aware, within the argument for banning page 3, that there is a glass ceiling effect brought upon the apparent objectification and sexualization of women. And through that means women can't or haven't been able to be pushed up to the higher levels of influence and power. And there is evidence that I mean, I don't disagree with that, but that is changing. That is changing. Page 3 is still around. Within Plymouth ourselves, we've got a vice chancellor who's a woman. We have our mayor, who's a woman. We have the president of our student union, who's a woman, and has been for the last few years. With the majority of your executive officers, your democratically elected officers, have been women. Our CEO of the students' union is a woman. Is that glass ceiling still in effect? Do we still see women as not being able to get to leadership positions? What I also want to talk about, and this is as far as is a topic which everyone covers, as far as aware, is that we are consumers. We consume. There's a market. There's a demand for this. It is there. People buy the Sun. It is a national newspaper. It is extremely well selling. As far as it does extremely well. And that's a choice. I'll go back to that those freedoms. That's a freedom of choice. People choose to read the Sun newspaper, as well as the Mirror, as well as the Daily Star. People choose to read it. There is an economic demand, a market demand, as well as looking into the economic side of it as well. It provides jobs. It does. You might not agree with the Sun. It's not a very good paper. I don't personally read it. I wouldn't read it because it's low tosh. But people do read it. There is an economic justification for it. But you look at Nuts as a magazine, that's been driven closure because people don't want to buy it. And that's fine. That's a market choice. That's a consumer choice. You look at where we sell the Sun on campus, that again has limited sales. Is this argument campus as a city, as a culture, we're changing already? It might be the fact that, as with Nuts, page 3 slowly disappears anyway. As well, the last final point upon this slide is the free choice for consumers and the girls. I just want you to remember that that is a choice of the consumer, is the choice of the women. That's absolutely fine. My final slide here is about the principles. The cultural acceptance. We as a culture might not accept it, but a lot of our culture also does accept it. We work in a democratic society. Surely we should respect that other people have different opinions and different choices. But upon that, are we looking at the symptom rather than the source. If we're thinking about objectification, sexualization as objectifying, as sexualizing, I don't think so. I think that we are literally just dealing with a potential symptom. Sure, there should be more education. Sure, there should be more done at a previous stage. More there should be done to support families with guiding our young people into the right careers, the right choices that will help society develop and become more diverse. And you have this argument against the Sun as a supporter of page 3 views. What about them? If we're going to oppress one person's view and one person's opinion to share what they want to do, are we going to oppress other people's views who we don't agree with? And it's a self-defined audience. The Sun defines itself as a family newspaper. If you remove that stereotype, that self-defined classification for the newspaper, does that then make it okay? Again, coming back to, is this argument really needed? Whereas if you take that away, it's just a newspaper, as with any newspaper, who has the opportunity to share what they want to share, when they want to share, to the consumers which they see are out there. And I personally feel this is a little bit hypocritical, where we are using oppressive means to limit oppressive views. Freedom of choice. We have the freedom of speech, we have the freedom of thought, and the freedom of expression. Page 3 is that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. Some really interesting points there. Okay, now I'm going to introduce the second half of the evening, and I'd like to welcome Jess Horner to produce her opposing arguments.
Hi everyone, I'm Jess, and I'm currently the Women's Rep on Parliament. I'd just like to apologise, I've got a cold, so if I start coughing, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about objectification and what it is, and why does it matter. So I believe before we can discuss the problems with page 3, we need to understand objectification and the effect that it actually has on women. You've got a definition of objectification here, which came from a psychological, usually a female body person, but as Phil pointed out, it can also happen to men, but usually not on as large scale, to a sexual object whose purpose is to provide gratification for another. Different women experience sexual objectification in different ways, and there is no universal experience. The factors of age, race, sexual identity, and disability can all affect the type of objectification a person experiences. For example, a lesbian woman might be told by a man that sleeping with him will cure her. Or a woman of colour may be reduced to a savage or exotic stereotype where the man wants to civilise her. When we talk about sexual objectification, it's really important that we consider how factors such as race and sexuality, and the others I mentioned, intersect with objectification. And it's important that we are aware that one person's experience may differ from another, and this approach is called intersectionality, and I hope when I talk about oppression and objectification, you bear that in mind. So all groups of women, however, are subjected to viewing objectifying images of other women every day in the media. It's all. This means that they begin to judge their worth based on their physical attractiveness. This can lead to feeling a deep sense of hatred of their own body or body parts. Mental health problems can result from this, internalized self-loathing, such as eating disorders, self-harm, and anxiety. Sexual objectification does not only put women's health at risk as well and well-being at risk, but when they self-objectify, however, it also affects the way that men see women. So you go to the next slide. This is the first step towards the justification of violence against that person or group of people, and this is something we have seen throughout history, from the Holocaust to slavery, and it's something that's still happening to women. And there are several psychological studies that you can find that back up the link between objectification, dehumanization, and then ultimately violence. Additionally, we see that images of violence against women are regularly used in advertising. This further distorts what is seen as normal and appropriate ways to act in regards to a woman. The Sun claimed to be a family newspaper. However, throughout the publication, there are highly sexualized images of the achievements of female athletes and politicians in particular. And of course, there's page 3, which many children see at a very young age, and which has in no doubt has led to many women and girls feeling that their bodies are not beautiful. They aren't worth very much, and that they need to take drastic measures such as extreme diets and plastic surgery to achieve a perfect body, which is ultimately unattainable. Is it any wonder most teenage girls would rather be beautiful than smart when academics like Mary Beard are branded as too ugly for TV, whilst glamour models are lavish with attention and fame? What kind of message is this sending out to girls, and that pose in these magazines? But I think that our girls deserve something else to look up to and something else to aspire to. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. That was brilliant. So now I'd like to present Lucy Holmes, the founder of No More Page 3, to give her opposing arguments.
Thank you very much. Yes, so it's quite interesting. I know there are women who, you know, are very, very pro page 3, obviously, because women do page 3. But I just want to say to the two gentlemen who stood up and spoke really eloquently and had some great points. For years, every day on page 3 of the biggest selling national newspaper, we'd seen young, big, hairless scrotums. Every day for 44 years. Okay, get it into the context of this a bit. Women run the country. Men. Men haven't even had the vote for 100 years. In fact, actually 1 in 3 men at school will be groped by women. I think 1 in 2, the statistic currently is 1 in 2 will be physically or sexually assaulted by the opposite sex. So just get that into the context. So 44 years after these images of young, big, hairless scrotums every day on page 3, there's a bit of a movement saying, you know, can we lose the scrotum pictures, please? You know, nothing against people who do it. You know, love to see scrotums, they're great. But, you know, we've got, you know, our sons here, and they, you know, we really want them to grow up and feel they can be anything in this world. But actually, they're worried about the size of their balls. Actually, you know, one of my sons is, you know, wants surgery and he hasn't even finished developing. You know, can we just lose the scrotum pictures? Yeah, and you know, like, you know, my sons will be walking down the street and women will be shouting, show us your balls, and grabbing them. Can we just lose the scrotum pictures? So you just maybe try and think about that for a bit, because sometimes I find it quite bizarre that we have to, you know, debate and campaign for years just to say, can we not present one gender naked for the other in a family newspaper, rather like we represent men? That's all we're saying. Okay, so yeah, some great points. So okay, so page 3 started in 1970. You know, okay, getting into context, there were only 23 MPs in Westminster at the time out of 600, and 23 female MPs out of about 600 and something at that time. Completely male-managed media, male-managed country. So it's probably quite easy for a group of men to sit around and going, do you know what? Let's look at some rather than, you know, because some people say, oh, you know, it's really empowering. This is really empowering. It's really good for body image. And, you know, I've heard people at the Sun say it's really good for body image. But I don't think the conversations in 1970 went, do you know what? Teenage girls are really disempowered, aren't they? They're really disempowered. What would really empower them? Yeah, and they've got really bad body image. What would really help them with that? I know. Why don't we show young, naked, white, big-breasted 16-year-olds? That would really empower them. make money out of selling women's naked bodies. Okay, and actually the models were 16 in 1970. They remained 16 until 2003 when the law changed. So basically the situation you saw throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s were, 16-year-old girls on page 3. Sam Fox, Linda Lusardi, all the really famous models were 16 at the time. Now we're learning now about that culture of the 70s and 80s. You don't have to look very far at men going to prison at the moment. Things that are happening. It's not got a great history, page 3. Now, I'm going to go on and on here, sorry. But in the 80s, so we still have page 3. In the 80s, an MP stood up. She really, really tried to get these pictures banned. She tried to get legislation made to make it illegal. She had thousands of letters of support, and she had overwhelming support actually in the House of Commons. Now, amongst these letters of support, 12 were actually from women who had had page 3 mentioned to them while they were being raped. Now, the response to Claire Short, the MP who stood up, speaking about this, from the Sun newspaper was absolutely just disgusting. They launched this complete campaign of attack against her. They said she was fat, jealous, ugly, she was a killjoy. They superimposed her face on that of a page 3 model's body. Even when she spoke out about it 10, 20 years later, I think it was, the Sun sent a busload of page 3 models to the house she shared with her 90-something-year-old mother to protest about this in 2014. I would like to say, there's so much I can say. Some of my favourite arguments were mentioned there. Oh yeah, Phil said that, why worry about page 3 of the Sun when everything else is so rubbish? Look at Cosmo. And for me, that's one of my favourite worst arguments. It's like walking into a room that's just covered in crap and going, oh, it's a bloody mess, let's not bother. Let's start in a corner. Yes, it's shit. How women are represented is shit, because everywhere we're presented with this ridiculously high beauty ideal. But actually we say and think and do interesting and incredible things. And why don't we celebrate that? Why don't we make life a little bit safer, a little bit kinder, a little bit more respectful for the young women coming after us? So I say let's roll up our sleeves and have a crack at page 3 and have a crack at Cosmo. Let's clear it all up. Okay. What else? When you grow up and the largest, shiniest image in your newspaper is of a young woman standing in her knickers showing her breasts for men, that's going to really, really shape your aspirations. And of course, if you fall into that narrow, tiny criteria of beauty decided by men in 1970, if you fall into that category, if you get chosen to be on page 3 and make money, of course you're going to feel empowered. You're going to feel pretty amazing. I'm not saying that it's not empowering for the women. I'm saying it's disempowering for other women. I'm saying it's really disempowering for the 14-year-old girl who sits next to the man at the bus, open with page 3, and says, "Oh, you could be on there one day, love, or you won't get on there with those tits." How is it empowering for a 16-year-old girl being coerced into she lives in, but everywhere, including the national newspaper, is saying that that's what her body's there for? I find it disempowering for all other women. There was another thing about this freedom of choice, yeah, but what about our freedom? What about our freedom about women not to live in a society that pretty much says, shut up, girls, and get your tits out? What about our freedom? What about those girls' freedom, not to have to sit on the bus and have that? Yeah, so pornography. Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by pornography. It's a brilliant debate, not brilliant, but it's a debate of our age, and I think, it is impacting on how young men and women interact. It sets up some really, really harsh gender stereotypes that are rubbish for amount of hardcore pornography available to young people on the internet. Everyone's concerned about this. The Sun is a newspaper. The Sun is in an amazing position of power to really get the message across about the dangers of online pornography. But anything the Sun newspaper does to highlight the effects of online pornography is going to be drowned out by a neon sign that says, shut up, girls, and get your tits out. Okay, so I think I've probably gone on for 10 minutes, have I? Have I? Can I go on? Can I carry on? I don't really know how long. Oh, I've got some more time. Okay, cool. Oh yeah, if you don't like it, don't buy it. I love this argument. It's my favourite word. Most affected me when I was age 11. I didn't buy it. But I'm age 11, my breasts are coming, and my dad and my brother, who I love to pieces, and I know love me to pieces, were coming and they talk about the boobs on page 3 because that's what you do, because it's in a newspaper and it's normalised and you can. Okay, so me as an 11-year-old girl whose breasts were developing, and these men who I looked up to who were informing me about the world were talking about these breasts, and I was a woman getting breasts. Breasts seemed like a pretty big deal. And actually, there I was, and my breasts didn't look like the ones in the newspaper. So I just felt ashamed. I felt like I'd failed. I never really told anyone about this, but it felt like a big deal. big hug and say it's okay. Do you know what I mean? I wish you'd had a eureka moment of going, I'm a woman. Yeah, these are mine. It's my part of my body. So yeah, if you don't like it, don't buy it. You know, those 12 women who had pages you mentioned to them while they were being raped, they didn't buy it. These young girls on the bus who have this, you know, they're not buying it. We're actually, you know, I think so many people support the campaign now. So many people haven't bought the paper, but yet been really, really affected by it. What else was this? What else was I going to respond to? Oh, context. You know, I love boobs. I love nudity. I love sex, right? But it's the wrong context. Showing one gender naked, showing women naked in a family newspaper is the total wrong context. And I tell you when, especially it becomes the wrong context, is when this newspaper is telling stories about sexual assault of women. Like, on what planet? On what planet? Does a newspaper run a story about terrible acts of rape and sexual assault against a young woman, and in the middle of that story show a topless, smiling 21-year-old's breast, you know, because men like to look at boobs? On what planet do you do that? When Rape Crisis talks about rape and things like that, does it show in the middle of it, of their literature, a picture of, you know, a topless woman because men like looking at boobs? No, of course not. I really think, like, in about 5 years' time, we'll look back on this. I'm missing loads of things that I meant to say. Am I done, or do I carry on? I can carry on. No, shall I carry on? Okay, yeah, so basically, shall I carry on? Shall I just carry on? Yeah, so my story, so I had a bit of a light bulb moment in the summer of 2012. As I said, I grew up with the Sun in my house. And my brother always said it's the best newspaper for sport, right? And the Olympics was on, and I was like, oh, the Olympics is on, that sporty, I'll buy the Sun. And I actually... Sun's dropped page 3 while the Olympics is on. And I did actually think, oh, maybe out of respect for other cultures visiting the country, maybe they've dropped it. Obviously not. Anyway, so I bought the Sun, and I was reading about Jessica Ennis, who just won her incredible gold medal. And I was really inspired by the Olympics. And I think particularly inspired because right, we as women, we don't see women's sport covered like nearly at all. Women's sport gets the same coverage as men's darts. 5% of sport covered is women's sport, but the Olympics was such an exception to that, yeah. And it was so amazing and inspiring to see these women celebrated on podiums. Oh, I bought new trainers. It was just so exciting. Anyway, so I'm reading about Jessica Ennis on the train that day, and I then turned to page 13, and there was this massive image of a beautiful young woman in her knickers, and it was just so weird. And I've seen these in the face and told it was a man's world. It was like, here was me reading about women and men and sport, woo. You know, there was this image, and it was just like, this isn't for me. This so isn't for me. Here's this. It was just so weird, and I was so weirded out that I couldn't stop thinking about it, and which, yeah, I just really couldn't stop thinking about it. And I'll tell you what got me. Hers was the largest. Was of the young woman standing in her knickers showing her breasts for men, and I was like, wow, what's that saying about a woman's place in society? What's it teaching little girls about where their value lies? What's it teaching little boys about how to respect women? I really couldn't stop thinking about it. Yeah, so I wrote a letter to the editor of The Sun that was like 3 pages long. I was like, I'll put it. I knew that that letter would do absolutely nothing. Yeah, but I had a lot of passion, and I wanted to see if I was the only person who could feel all that passion for these pictures. And I do agree, because both of you commented that we need better education about this. Yeah, we need better education, and got, yeah, and I agree with the education, but I do think, like, let's help parents and let's help teachers by taking out some of the really, really glaring sexist things in our culture. Let's give them a hand. Let's give them a hand. But also, yeah, let's not be afraid to use our voice, because we are those people. We are those educators, you know. So let's, you know, so yeah, let's not shut up and just sort of be, you know, apathetic about it. Let's keep shouting. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy, and thank you to all the speakers. Can we have a round of applause for all the speakers, because that was quite a brave thing to do. And I'd just like to apologise. A little bit of swearing came up then. I'm sorry if anyone was Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute comfort break and then move into the questions. So feel free to have a walk around campus with toilet. If you do want to write any more questions, again, write them on a piece of paper, put your name on the top, and pop them to the end of the row. Then we're going to go through them in the next half. Right, hello everyone. We are back and we're going to go on to the next part of the evening, which is questions. A lot of you didn't put your names on the questions, which is fine, so I'm going to just read them out and open them up to the panel to answer. Panel, I'm going to give you 3 questions at a time, so you can write down some notes and let yourself think. So question number 1, should topless be removed from art galleries and film too? Number 2, shouldn't we be working towards a society in which the naked form penis is in the paper, not less boobs? Do you agree? And I got to say the word penis tonight. Brilliant. And question number 3, would you say that this is a fair debate? So I'll give you a chance to think of the answers for those questions.
What was the second one again? Sorry?
Oh, brilliant.
You don't have to say penis.
That was so
Should there
penis.
be more penis and less boobs? Not less boobs, but
More
more penis.
penises, well, not.
Society being made exceptions to.
So, sorry, Charlie, question number 2 was, shouldn't we be working towards a society in which the naked form of both men and women isn't being viewed in negative light? We should be fighting for more penises in the paper, not less boobs. Do you agree?
Thank you.
So we'll start with question 1, which is about toplessness being removed from art. Jessie, you okay to start?
Yeah. I don't think that toplessness should be removed from art galleries and from film. With films, I would say because there is protect younger people from seeing that, and that's when most of our ideas about self-image and self-worth are being formed. So I think it's important that younger people are protected from that. And art gallery is really the same. We talked about choice, and it's your choice to go to an art gallery, whereas it's not your choice, as Lucy said, on the bus to be presented with an image you didn't want to see and maybe hear comments you don't want to hear. Whereas if you go to an art gallery, that's your choice. Plus, I would say most images in art galleries are more tasteful and a celebration of the human body rather than it being presented in such a
Comment?
I don't really think there's anything I can add to that. I agree completely with Jessica on that one.
I do, if that's all right. Jess, you say something about protecting from nakedness through film. They've got the age guidance is 12, 15, 18. But the question really is, to the audience again, is why are we protecting people from nakedness? I wrote an essay during my 3rd year. I studied criminology. I was looking at naturism and the link that they as a society have towards crime. And it was showing that as a society, as nature, assault, and as a whole, there are generally less feelings of sexual attractiveness. If you look over the summer period as well, the statistics generally show that one of the linkages is that because people are showing more flesh just because of the heat, there's less people, less people are sexually assaulted, and more people use condoms. So equally, if you look at that as statistics and you look at those linkages, then if you're really trying to protect from nakedness from showing, as well, you say it's a pro-choice to attend art galleries. That was a lot of what I was saying throughout my presentation as one of these reasons of choice. You could say that it's a choice to attend art galleries, your choice to see nakedness on display in whatever format, and I agree with you in the fact that it does show a more diverse range of nakedness, and that's one of my personal distastes towards the sun, but at the same time you do mention that as to pro-choice.
And Lucy, do you have anything to
Yeah,
respond?
no, I think it's a context argument, really, page 3, because, you know, for me, it's like kids look at the paper, they see page after page, pictures of men in clothes doing stuff like running the country, achieving in sport. Then they see this massive image of a young woman standing in a knicker showing a breast for men. So that's kind of, it's that context. You go into an art gallery and you see, well, I mean, people used to tweet and they used to say, you know, they used to tweet
as pictures of page 3 models and say, it's art, this is art. And I used to always tweet back a picture of Michelangelo's David and say, so is this, but we don't see this on page 3. You know, and I think, you know, a lot of art is the male body, the amazing male body. A lot of art is women breastfeeding, like, you know, that kind of like religious, you know, the Mother Mary breastfeeding. And again, you know, how to be, you know, I've countless stories of women being made to feel uncomfortable actually breastfeeding in public now in our society. But yeah, we're happy to show these teenage breasts on page 2 of a national newspaper. So yeah, it's a context argument. So I think, and I think going on to, because I want to talk about the nudity thing, but I think that's about that's kind of the next question, isn't it? So
Yeah, so the next question is about, shouldn't we be fighting for equality in the newspapers rather than getting rid of one side? So Phil, can we start with you on that one?
Well, I personally wouldn't like to see more penises in the newspaper. For various reasons. I don't think that is going to solve anything. If anything, it's going to make the situation worse, because people are saying that and a lot of people seem to think that objectification of men isn't there. It is there, but if we start putting penises in the paper, that's just going to get worse as well. So it's not actually going to solve anything, it's just going to make the whole situation worse.
Okay, and Lucy, would you like to?
yeah, I mean, if there was like some kind of I don't know, some very different future where we all said collectively, oh my God, we're these amazing, sensual, sexual beings. How can we celebrate that fact in the newspaper in a really inclusive and celebratory way? You know, if that's what we were collectively doing, so that one day maybe you'd have like an overweight, contented elderly man sitting naked under a tree, a picture of that maybe. And then, you know, I don't know, a woman who'd maybe lost a breast, its ages, colours. If that was the sort of thing we were doing, then yeah, maybe. But if it was a case of, yeah, we're just going to see some penises in the same way that like pornography shows, you know, I know that, you know, pornography and the penises in pornography are, you know, affecting young men and how they're viewing their penises. You know, if it was going to be that, then that's just like creating this another horrible, you know, having a woman who's grown up in a society that, you know, and, you know, I explained about my kind of shame of my breast. I mean, we don't really want to, I personally don't, I'm not up for sort of encouraging men to feel that way. So no, yeah. No.
Charlie?
Yeah, I bring on the scrotums, that's fine. If there's a market for it. And there might be, if, you know, people are willing to buy a newspaper and their sole focus is on seeing a scrotum, then, you know, so be it, that's their choice. There isn't that available, maybe because people don't want to see it, and that's fine. The links towards showing boobs is because people I could probably imagine men wanting to show their scrotum off on a national newspaper.
Really?
Hey, this is equal society. I can imagine that there probably would be. I wouldn't, but again, like, I just want to kind of go back to that pro-choice. If people feel that there's a market for scrotums within newspapers, then so be it. Scrotums. If people want to see boobs and they're buying boobs, then let's see boobs. That's their choice. That's people's choice.
And Jess?
I think the argument that if you did that, it would make sexual objectification for men worse is probably valid. It probably would make sexual objectification worse for men. But then why are you keeping it for women? It's not sexual objectification for one or the other. You can have it. Page 3 will stop sexual objectification for anyone completely, but I don't understand the idea that it would be objectifying for a man for him to be in page 3, but not objectifying for a woman. It's exactly the same. You're still being valued based on a body part that you were born with and that is not the summary of your value and contribution to society. And the other thing, Charlie, that you said, people don't want to see it, and I'm not, when talking about men, well, what people want to see women, the people who put women in magazines are the men and newspapers and the men that are in power and the men that make the decisions. Most women have said they don't want to see it. So why is it like it's disgusting for a man to look at another man's penis? He doesn't want to see at someone's breasts every time I try and read the news. Well, I don't read The Sun, but I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that in my corner shop, in the SU shop, on the bus. I don't want to see it. So using the argument, men don't want to see penises, well, not everybody wants to see boobs when they're eating their breakfast. So by that argument, both of your arguments have kind of come to the summary of don't have men in it, don't have women either, and then we're all happy, everyone's satisfied, less objectification, excellent.
I think I didn't explain it correctly enough. If you're going to have objectification, then fair enough, objectify both. But I didn't mean to and not the
But
other.
you're supporting page 3, so you are implying that. Because
No,
you're saying
no,
you're saying keep it for women,
No, 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 no,
but
no.
don't have
Wait,
it for
can
men.
we not speak over each other and let each other have an opinion?
No, I'm saying that there needs to be more education, and if you're going to take away page 3, then it needs to be a well-rounded overall, the whole media. That same sort of thing that page 3 creates also needs to be taken away.
I think everybody who is here that doesn't want page 3 would absolutely support that. But as you said, you've got to start somewhere, and this is where we're choosing to start.
Very fair point.
Okay, I'm going to move on now. Don't want you to hit each other. And the last question was, is this debate... Start with you.
I don't really know where to start with that. I would probably look for clarification from the person who asked the question, but...
The question was, bearing in mind that the woman on the right is far more experienced and had twice as much amount of time, would you say it's a fair debate for representing both sides?
Okay. I think that as I do respect Lucy's opinion, and she's formed it over a longer period than myself, and she's obviously been potentially subject to objectification as well as seeing boobs on more than what I have seen. I still think this is a fair debate because my opinions are just equally as valid because they are still my opinions. I represent the pro keeping page 3 because that's my opinion. I don't feel that should be not listened to and not thought of as unfair just because I have less years on me or less experience within the topic.
Jess?
I think that it's fair because a wide range of people were invited to speak here. Obviously, Lucy is an expert. She started. That's incredible. But there were also people who really strongly support page 3 that were invited to come, and none of them took up the opportunity for whatever reason. So I think it's fair because everybody was invited fairly. And as you said, Lucy did speak for a little bit longer, but we kind of all came to our own conclusion. We weren't told to stop. So I'm sure we could have probably had the option to carry on a little bit longer had we have wanted to. So I don't really think it's a question of whether it's fair or not.
Lucy?
Yeah, I should probably have had a timer because I just sort of went on and on. So yeah, apologies for taking more time. I was just, could carry on. But I agree, if people were invited. So,
It would have been really nice to see you debate some similar expertise. But I want to say thanks to everyone else for putting this on.
Oh, we've got emotion at the bottom. Phil, have you got anything to add?
I think it is fair. I mean, I understand exactly where you're coming from with the similar expertise, and I actually agree. It would have been nice for someone to be here with the same level of expertise as Lucy on the pro side. I'm going to come clean and say that in many ways I was actually playing devil's advocate, and during the little intermission that we had. It's just a really, really good forum for people, especially students like we are, to get the experience that we need in order to follow career paths like Lucy has chosen. It doesn't really matter whether it's fair or not. It's how we put across our arguments and whether or not we're able to change the viewpoints of the panel, of somebody else on the panel. That's what's the important thing. And whether or not we've engaged you as an audience and changed your viewpoints.
Okay, thank you, Phil. I'm going to move on to the next question now. So this is just the one this time, so not that much time to think. Where does the line lie between the society being comfortable with women's bodies and their over-sexualization or objectification?
Just repeat the question.
Yeah, of course. Where does the line lie between the society being comfortable with women's bodies and their over-sexualization?
I'm not really entirely sure what is meant by this question. I guess you're saying where do you draw a line between women's bodies being something that is seen and celebrated, and then when does it become sexualization? Is that what was meant? Oh.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, I wasn't clear there. So how are we still okay then? Celebration of the body is not ashamed of them? So like if we just say no women's bodies now, then that's not how does that work?
Yeah. I think definitely a good point that was made earlier is if we had images of different kinds of people, not the same images. I think if you looked at page 3 on any day, you could maybe change the hair color and the eye color and it's the same person. They all fit an exact mold. Obviously, I know that they're not the same people. They have their own opinions, but that's not what comes across. It's the same body shape again and again, the same color skin, and I just think that's not representative of what women are. That's not celebrating what women are. Like Lucy said, if you had a cancer patient, a survivor of that, that would be incredibly insightful and you'd be learning something rather than just seeing almost a faceless body. So yeah, I think well, and not judging them based on their body, seeing their body, seeing that that is a vital part of them and it's important, but it's not the be all and the end all, and hearing something about who they are, their relationships, their interests, their brain, on balance with looking at their body, I think makes it a lot more beautiful and a lot easier to appreciate the body for what it is. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Jess. Charlie?
Yeah, I completely agree with Jess. The line I perceive is when it's become far more all-inclusive. It demonstrates all ranges of diversity, illness, everything, and I'm all for that. Don't get me wrong. That to a different kind of change it to a different argument. Where I'm pro page 3, I think it's absolutely fine for people to have the choice to be able to show their boobs. Where I would like to see changes and really stand by this is if the sun and the mirror and the star actually changed their glamour models so that it's not so stereotypical, so they actually had a wider range. But I still believe in that pro-choice agenda. So I do agree with Jess where she stands with this.
Phil?
I think that so long as our society remains as dominantly male as it still is, unfortunately, the line is going to be very blurred for a very long time. The first thing that came into my mind when Steph read that question was education, education, education. You know, I was born in the 80s, I grew up in the 90s, and I've seen a gradual change from where we. That's been fantastic, but still, sex is very much a social taboo. We're still very much a sexually repressed society. When you take into account Holland, who had the age of consent was 12 for many, many, many years. It's recently gone up to 14. But they had, for decades, the lowest rate of teenage pregnancy in Europe, if not the world, purely because of their open attitude to sex and the human image, not just specifically women, but men as well. If the education is there, there won't be such a blurred line.
Yeah, it's a really lovely question. I'm sure I'll have some amazing insights on the train on the way home, and I'll be like, oh, damn. Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think Phil, you touched on some of it. Yeah, because um, I think it's a lot like, how to explain it. A bit of a chat about this, kind of like how we view, how female sexuality really, kind of. And I think what most fascinates me is that as a woman, growing up, everywhere I looked about me, female sexuality was being presented to me by men. So page 2 was decided in 1970 by men. Online porn, 99% of it's made by men. So for me, it was like, okay, here's your sexuality, and it consists of having big boobs, showing them in a newspaper when you're really quite young, or going to online porn, and there's, these sort of kind of things happening. And actually, so for me, it was like, it took me a long time to go, oh, okay, no, this doesn't fit, and actually and I worked through a lot of my kind of insecurities in order straight to feminism. To be honest, it took me straight to feminism. I came to feminism from looking at online porn and just going, wow, what have we done to sex? I saw some stuff online that I was like, whoa, and it kind of led me on a journey, but straight to feminism, because I think it's one area where we're really, really not equal. And I think it might be controversial, but I don't really think we've really seen and explored female sexuality. So that's kind of exciting that we've got that to look forward to. So I think, yeah, this idea, it starts with talking about it. For me, it starts with talking about how it feels to be presented with these things and online porn and page 3, and how we feel, and I think it starts with a dialogue about sex. And I think women, because we've been silenced for a long time, I think we need to be in that dialogue. Yeah, so lovely question.
To that? Yeah.
I'd love to, but you're not prepared for it.
Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah.
Well, I'll wait till the end for that delight. So if I can, any more? We'll take one more comment from the audience. The gentleman in the back had his hand up. Sorry.
Circumstance that just came up. Unfortunately, I made a comment to Lucy before we walked over here that it's unfortunate that the split is so very stereotypical. I would have loved to have seen a mix of genders on both sides.
Sorry, I would like to say I helped organise this debate, and we asked a lot of people to come and speak. We even asked Courtney Quinn, Plymouth local big girl, to come and speak, and she reported to the calm. So it wasn't, oh, let's get men to do one side, women to the other. It was completely bad. It's just an unfortunate turn of events in that sense.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question now. So, shut up and get your tits out was a reference when discussing a man's world. Isn't this a stereotype of men? We get it just as bad as women do. Just remember, we're respecting everyone in the room. Safe space, please. Phil, are you okay to start on this one?
Yeah. Yes, we do get it. Nowhere near as bad as women do. Nowhere near. We are a male-dominated society. Sex is controlled by men. It's not fair to say that we get it just as bad as women, because we don't. Yes, it is there. Yes, it's in the media. You all saw the pictures of Channing Tatum, Jake Gyllenhaal. But I do not think that men get it worse or just as bad, because it's nowhere near given the same kind of exposure that women are given in that context.
Lucy?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I mean, and I'd say, I think, you know, we absorb the culture around us, so we become it. So, you know, women play into patriarchy, you know, as much as men. Yeah, the statistics are, you know, if I think about myself and my experiences of sexual assault and the friends I know, and, you know, incidences, there's a lot, you know, and it's a lot more for the women, sadly, you know. So these statistics are stories that, you know, we love. So yeah, I would say it's not, and that's not, it doesn't happen to men, and I feel really sympathetic for the, you know, those incidences. But it does, like you said, Phil, yeah, it does happen worse for women.
Charlie?
Yeah, I agree. It does happen worse for women. But what I hate is the fact that my thoughts, my rationale, are based because of my gender. And like the fact that members of the audience might think that my views, my opinions are based because of my perceived stereotype. I really don't like that at all. I think I'm relatively well educated, graduated from Plymouth University, and such are my views. From that education, I really don't like the fact that people see me as a man. My views are male orientated.
Jess?
I think the argument of isn't that stereotyping men is getting a bit played out. As the gentleman earlier acknowledged, men, and it's brilliant when you can acknowledge it, and I'm not blaming you as an individual man, any one of you, for patriarchy, but you have to acknowledge that you benefit from this system in the same way I benefit from white privilege. That doesn't mean I would want to oppress a black person, but institutionally, that is how the way the world works currently. I'd also like to say we kind of touched on abuse a little bit, and the statistics do show women suffer sexual abuse more than men do. Women are so much more likely to be sexually harassed on a night out. You could talk to almost any woman at any university experience sexual harassment on a night out, or even going to the library. These things happen, they're real, they need to stop being ignored, but that doesn't mean that men don't aren't victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment as well. But I would like to make the point that feminism isn't trying to stop men talking about this, we just want to be able to talk about it. And it's patriarchy actually that doesn't allow men to be open about abuse, because patriarchy teaches men that to be a man you have to be strong and closed about your emotions, and if you admit to being a victim of abuse, you can get horrible, and you're reduced to the worst things you could possibly be, a woman or a homosexual. That's what happens if you are a man and you say that something like that has happened to you, or you show any sign of weakness or anything that does not fit the patriarchy. You are branded with those terms, and I think patriarchy affects men as well, and feminism doesn't want to put you down. It wants to stop everybody being put down by the patriarchy.
Lucy and Jess, and thank you, Megan, whoever you are, for asking this question. What is the plan then? It's all well and good to preach at us, but what and when and how is change going to happen? So Jess, if you can start with that one.
I don't really know what the plan is. I think we've spoken today, all of us, about education, and I think just things like this, publicly talking about the problems in our media, that's a really good place to start with the plan, because when you start talking about these things, you start getting people to question things that they just take as commonplace. Realize how bizarre they are, because we grow up and we think that this is normal, and when we have public debates like this, when we have more and more news stories about feminism, I think it's incredible, and just waking up people's minds to see what's going on, and then I think the action will come from that, with more women being educated, and more men being educated as well, and them standing together and saying this isn't the way we want the world to live, and then they will bring about their own action. Hopefully that's the plan.
And Lucy?
Yeah, like that. Silence for so long that just by speaking up about matters of inequality, we shift the status quo. So just by talking about it, we're shifting a status quo, and I love that. And I think, yeah, I think we're going. I mean, another weird thing for me, I started the campaign, and I was like, for me, it was like I just done all this thinking, and I was like, oh my god, it's like, yeah, it will take a couple of months, and page 3 will go, and it's just like no one's thought about it, and it's not rocket science, and it's got to go. And then, like on the first day, it was like just really came across this like, wow, this kind of this really quite what I'd call a deep-rooted strand of sexism. You know, that just was like, you know, people on Facebook going, tits, I want to see tits, lol, is this a joke? And how those feelings of it nearly silencing you. It's like, oh God, what? You know, and then going through it, and it's been really interesting to have had like, you know, the responses of death threats and all sorts of stuff in doing it. And so you realise that actually, yeah, it's deep rooted and it's going to take a while. But I think we're getting somewhere. I think we're getting, you know, the movement's getting bigger. You talk about education. I'm talking in lots of schools, being asked to talk in lots of schools, designing workshops, seeing more and more campaigns happening. You know, I think someone said, oh, you know, you know, there's no glass ceiling and women are in power, but actually, you know, only 1 in 4 MPs are women. If you go to Westminster, it's like, oh my God, it's just like statues and paintings of men, and it's men in suits, and it's like, oh my God. In fact, the most sexist response I've had to my page 3 t-shirt, that No More Page 3 t-shirt that I've been wearing for like nearly 2 years, was in the House of Commons. So yeah, but so I think we keep, so what we're seeing, and 5% of newspapers are edited by women, we aren't yet in these positions of power, and I think when we are, we will see a big difference. But one place we are quite equal is on the internet. You know, we've got voices on the internet, and we're using them to talk about this stuff. We've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, we've got blogs. You know, so it's a really interesting time. Yeah, I think we'll see change, and we'll get rid of page 3, and then we'll, you know, and we'll keep going. Yeah.
Thank you. Has anyone from the audience got any comments on that question? Yeah, young lady at the back.
Katie, yeah, no. In all honesty, this is an incredible turnout for an event at this time of the year, at this venue, at this time of the evening. This is absolutely amazing, and thank you everybody that's turned up today. It's incredible. And the fact that we've had the debate, and this is going on Twitter, it's going on, articles going to be made about it, it's being streamed as far as I'm aware as well. This debate is going to be spread across the whole of the student population, and to expect more than what's here, which is already an incredible amount, is that students at this time of the year is also probably very unrealistic, and this is really fantastic turnout. Could I appreciate it, but I mean, whether or not, but any comments as to what the event and how it's run, I mean, they're probably best to talk about after the debate. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay, we're going to move to the next question now, because I just want one comment per question. So, do the panel think schools should offer glamour modelling as a career choice? Panel think schools should offer glamour modelling as a career choice. So, Lucy, I'm going to let you start with that one.
God, it's so long ago since I've been at school. I don't know how schools offer careers. So, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because there's so many, like, lots of glamour models support No More Page 3, you know, and actually some of the most heartbreaking comments on the petition have been from. They said, no, I did it at 18. I thought it was cool. I thought guys would think I was hot, and I was actually treated like a piece of meat. And they'll, like, you know, explain some horrible stories, and then, you know, and then it's like, and then they'll say, now I'm just trying to rebuild my confidence and get back my self-esteem. So, you know, we've got some sort of Linda Lusardi and some various, you know, famous page 3 models support us. So if, I mean, I don't know. I think, you know, if they were, if they were, they probably do know schools. I don't know, present it as a career choice, but I think if they do, then maybe sort of, you know, look at all sides of it. I mean, my issue with you know, the page 3 being in a newspaper is, you know, if I think about, you know, young women to do anything else. There's a newspaper renowned for sport. It's not encouraging girls and young women to do sport. It's not covering women's sport. The only thing it's encouraging them to do is take a photo of their bare boobs, and they could be a page 3 idol or live the dream of being on page 3. So it's like, It's just when it's constantly saying that, so it's against doing it. But when that's the thing that's repeatedly, drummed into you as being, this thing that women should do. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. They can present it as a career choice, but give all sides of it if you do.
Thank you, Lucy. And Charlie?
Didn't get taught at school how to be an entrepreneur. I didn't get taught at school a lot of things, but if I did, I'd be far more informed as to what decision I was going to make in the future. And I think the same kind of stance with Lucy here. If you're going to get taught about something, get offered an option to be able to look at it as a career, get taught about the positives and the negatives and the whole holistic approach to it. Offer it as a choice.
And offer it as a choice alongside being a politician and being other things. So you're not just assuming that,
yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Okay, and Jess?
Not here's a good career path for you. Although I don't think, like you said, I don't think schools actually really do that. Only on schools I've seen on TV have they ever said you should go into this career. But also I'd say if you are going to advise young girls that page 3 is a potential future career, would you advise young boys that potential future career because that's the same? Or even take it a step further, would you encourage any children that porn is a good future career? And I don't want to shame sex workers here because they're legitimate people, that's their choice, and I'm not saying that that is a wrong choice, but I think most people would feel it's an inappropriate thing to kind of encourage children to do or push them towards. And I definitely say there's an age when would you start talking about that? I think we need to start talking about sex with children earlier, but is this the things that we want to start talking about porn and how you can make a lot of money, but you could also be massively victimized? Or do we want to kind of bring it into a bit more of a normal discussion and talk about real life sex and what's happening with that? I think would be a better way to talk about sex with children. Yeah.
And Phil?
Thing I can really add to that is that if glamour modelling is going to be, or if it were to be offered as a career choice, then a male equivalent, whatever that may be, should also be offered in the grounds of fairness.
And the problem is, can I just start, is that it's the culture thing for it to be addressed well in schools, because in some schools, like we get stories from girls at school saying, oh, I was reading on page 3, and then people were making comments about me being on page 3, and it's still, page 3 is still used to harass and intimidate women. And actually, if you're going to start presenting 17-year-old, 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old people at school in that context, which is still we've got this kind of this sexist sort of banter going on, then it could be quite intimidating, I think, if it's not handled right. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know whether culturally we're quite ready to really present it properly, but that's about the culture that we're trying to change.
Just all boils back to the same way.
Okay, now we're going to move on to our last question, and that is, bearing in mind that 80% of the internet is images of naked women, shouldn't the debate be whether or not we should care about a single image in a newspaper? After all, people are allowed to print whatever they like. So Charlie, you okay to take this one first?
Do you mind if I don't?
Oh no, of
Sorry.
course not. I can pass it on, that's fine.
Yeah.
Phil, you okay to start? Yeah.
Quite frankly, people aren't allowed to print whatever they like. That's one of the reasons why worldwide with paedophilia. If all your argument is based upon is the fact that it's one image out of 80% of what's on the internet, I think in many ways a point has been missed. Because for me, this isn't just about whether or not it's page a boodle. I've said before, talking with Lucy in the little break that we had, and she mentioned to me that page 3 is a starting point. It's a national institution, in inverted commas, in this country. It's known by virtually everybody. And if the way to change the media is to go through then that's the way it needs to be. I'm all for the media to change, and it has to be done and start somewhere.
And Jess?
I think we should care about one image, because at the end of the day, like we said quite a few times, that's the largest image of a woman you will find in that newspaper. And I did a little bit of research and cut some pictures out of women from The Sun. It was very strange going and buying The Sun. It's not something I would normally be interested in doing. And it's true, predominantly the largest images are of a woman in her sports pages, and I don't think I saw any pictures of female politicians either. So in that context, that one image does matter, and I think, like Phil said, we do have to look at the whole media. It's a good place to start. But yeah, I would say the fact that 80% of the internet is naked women, that's a really worrying statistic to begin with. So it shouldn't be like, oh, 80% of the internet is naked women, so this one image doesn't matter. It should be, let's take it apart image by image so that we can say 80% of the internet isn't naked women, and maybe let's replace that with something educational or aspirational instead, because that's just a horrible statistic.
Charlie, ready now?
Yeah. It is a shocking statistic, the 80% of internet nakedness. It's also a major worry about internet pornography as well, is that it's just so under-regulated. And there's just not enough support for people who want to go into a career in pornography. That's my issues with that. In terms of having your choice to print, this is what I try to get do all the way throughout, is just try and broaden your understanding as to your freedom of choice. The Sun newspaper chooses to print a woman who's naked. The Telegraph chooses not to. The Independent chooses not to. The Guardian chooses not to. BBC chooses not to. ITV News chooses not to. There is their option. That's there, that's available for everyone to see and to look and research and gather their own opinions based upon what kind of political affiliation each of those parties, different companies has. I think it's absolutely fine for a newspaper. They choose what they want to print based on consumer demand.
And Lucy?
Yeah, I think I think I said it in the speech, but this whole idea that it's just choice doesn't work. You know, like people walk into a cafe, page 3 is left open, you're sitting next to somebody on the train, page 3 is there. It's still there whether you choose to buy it as a consumer or not. We are still affected by it. You know, I don't know how many stories I've got of teachers say, you know, bring in some papers for art class, and then suddenly a teacher's having to explain why there's a naked woman in a newspaper to a bunch of 4, 5, 6-year-olds or whatever. So it keeps constantly, there's so many stories there of what, like, when you haven't bought it, that it is affecting us. So it's not that simple. Yeah, I think it's very important to challenge this page. I think probably one of the reasons why I think it's so important is page 3 says that women are there for men. It says that they're there, they're naked, they're passive, they're there for and women aren't. They're more passive, subservient. They're less somehow in society. And I think this becomes really dangerous then when we look at online porn. One statistic that's really frightening is 88% of online porn shows acts of physical aggression towards women. Okay, women aren't called women in online porn, they're called sluts and whores. You know, there's a lot of stuff happening to them. The gender stereotypes are rubbish for men and women here. But I think we really need to be encouraging respect for women and encouraging like women's voices into these dialogues. Stuff. It's basically saying, like I said before, shut up, girls, and get your tits out. It's saying that you're there to be seen and not heard. You're there for men. All these things make it really, really hard for us to come equally into this online porn debate, you know. So yeah, I feel really, really passionately because page 3 just comes in. You know, kids see this paper, whether they've bought it or not, and and even before you can read the articles in the paper, you're processing the images. Yeah, we're processing visual information 60,000 times faster than text. So kids are learning stuff, they're absorbing stuff early. They're absorbing that women are less, that their bodies are available, that they're all this stuff You know, I don't think that we couldn't have had the situation in online porn without a culture that makes women a bit other, a bit more kind of like dehumanized, a bit more objectified. Okay, I was mentioning something, I didn't mention it earlier, but the most commonly used expression in response to page 3 that I'd heard throughout my whole life was, "Cool, look at the tits on that." And I never noticed the word that till I was thinking about page 3 that day. I never noticed the word that. I'd heard it for years. Now, you know, we've all heard it. Not just I'd look at the tits on that, I'd do that, I'd ruin that, I'd smash that. It's always this word that, quite often violent things. So we're dehumanizing women, and when we dehumanize them, we allow quite, you know, we know through history when we dehumanize people, you know, not great stuff happens. So yeah, let's get rid of this page. I think it's important.
Okay, we've got one comment right at the back, and then we're going to have to close. Yep.
Yeah, it's not so normalised. So you don't sit next to someone on the train necessarily looking at porn, or on the bus. But generally you don't. Whereas like the page 2 thing is, it's so normalised, isn't it? Yeah. Totally.
Okay, I think that rounds up the evening nicely. I just want to thank everyone for coming. I hope you enjoyed the evening. Can we give a big round of applause to all our debaters? And can we also give a round of applause to Maddie, Katie, and the Knowledge team for organising this event as well? If on your way out you could please just go to the tally and just say if you're for, against, or unsure. Have a lovely evening and have a safe journey home. Thank you very much.